We saw a company that had one protected product that was used on over 50% of the world's narrow-bodied fleet. It was a critical part required by the FAA, the US government, and we estimated that if Heicov could have one part approved and accepted by over 50% of the world's aircraft, narrow body, that we could find other parts that would be acceptable, and because we had credibility established initially, we could sell a second part, and then a third part, and a fourth part. We could get approval by the FAA, we could get approval by the airline, and then we would sell more and more parts. And in fact, that was the genesis of the business. We produced more PMA parts. First of all, we had to get them approved at the beginning. We got 2 or 3 a year approved. And in 1998, we were doing 25, in 99, 50. We're up to 500 a year. And the most difficult part now is to get them approved by the airline. It's one thing to get the FAA approved because that's one approval. But if you take the top 20 airlines and we say we make 500 parts, we need 10,000 approvals. That is a logistics nightmare. So the more parts you get approved, the harder it is. You're bigger your marketing staff, the longer it takes. This is a blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing because it keeps other people out of the market. They can't get into the market. It's a major barrier to entry. It's a curse because it takes us longer to sell a part. So, but on balance, overall we think it's a blessing. We started doing acquisitions to increase the growth profile. Now, some people, some analysts have suggested we shouldn't do acquisitions, but we should make more parts. And I understand that idea, but it's impossible. Because if we made 1,000 parts, instead of making acquisitions, we couldn't sell them. We couldn't get them approved. We couldn't get them through the airline pipeline. The acquisition, to me, is an alternative use really of organically generated funds. We can either take cash and put it into new products and expand that business, or we can take cash and go on the outside and buy an existing business with existing customers, market share, technology, and so forth. And I look at it as an alternative to internal growth. I don't have to take a risk by expanding a product line that I don't know really, might it sell, might it not sell. We can go out and buy a company that is experienced, has a track record, has new management and so forth in place that knows what it's doing, and we can make that acquisition at reasonable prices. And that's why we do the acquisitions. We normally leave the initial operator, the president, the founder of the company in charge, let him run the business, he or she run the business, and we incentivize them. Very often we buy less than 100% of their company, so they might have, we've bought as little as 51% and as much as 100%, but in many cases 80%, 75%, and we give them a multiple on the balance of their earnout. So if that company, say for example, it's earning $10 million when we buy it, and over the next 5 years, it goes from 10 to 20 million. The seller gets 80% based upon 10 million, and he gets 20% based upon 20 million. So it's a win-win. He's incentivized. We want to pay him the highest price. We want to pay him more because that means that Heicov gets more, he gets more, and psychologically, he's very happy. He's one happy camper, and that formula has worked. We saw an opportunity. We bought a business and sold it, and it was a business in the ground support field. Ground support is air conditioning, generators that provide service for aircraft on the ground. And we sold that business, but it had one little division that was making naval electronics. And that was a hugely profitable business. When we sold the ground support, we kept that business, And we said, here is an opportunity to find we found another industry that has all of the things that we like. Protected market, high technology, big margins, big cash flow. So let's find other companies that are doing that same niche type of work. And that's from that business, then we expanded into electronic technology. Electronic technologies overall is a huge cash flow generator. It runs at margins, operating margins of 26 to 32% after all expenses. And it's just a cash cow. Those businesses normally require a little CapEx because these are electronic. It's all brain power. It's not building plants like General Motors and a big factory that you have to depreciate over 40 years. You're building intellectual property with brilliant people, engineers, PhDs, and so forth, that make a product. And normally, that investment of technology is paid for over a couple of years, and it's included in the price of the product. So the cash flow from these businesses is very strong. And I'm a great believer. I love cash flow. Earnings per share is one thing, but you can't take earnings per share to the supermarket and pay your bills with it. You do it with cash flow. And I'm a CPA. I learned that. And forget about generally accepted accounting and all that other stuff. It's important. Cash flow is king. And one of the reasons Heicov sells at the highest multiple, I believe, is we have no debt, and we generate 150 to 180% of net income in cash flow. And we try, as I indicated to you before, we try to keep it very simple, high margins, big cash flow, barriers to entry.
I think actually the fact that we are, that the three of us are in the same family, and Tom's really an adopted Mendelssohn, there's no politics. And, in this particular dynamic, our mom and dad always treated the two of us equally. So there was never any preference, one child over the other. And the two of us are best friends, extremely close. We live very close to each other. We socialize together. Our wives are friendly, children friendly. We're all in it together. We truly view it as one entity. There's not sub-families here. There's one, all for one and one for all. And I think that's been very important. There's no politics in the business. There's nobody trying to get ahead and cut somebody else's throat. And in business, all sorts of crap happens. And the unexpected happens, things go off the rails, and if you've got somebody who you can't trust, and who doesn't have your back, and who's going to stab you in the back when things are not good, then things fall apart. There have been times that aerospace has been in the dumps, and Victor didn't come after me. There have been times electronics has been in the dumps, I didn't go after him. And I think that's... but I but I think that's very, very important. And I think that lack of politics has been, that's the culture of the business. We don't like, our people have to have that same DNA, and they see that behavior and they emulate it, and they understand, not always, and bring some folks in and they don't understand the benefit of it until they're at the end of the stick and they realize, oh, it is good to have a friend. So I think the family dynamic has permitted this. Also, just getting into the whole trust thing, since we buy the businesses at a reasonable price, we don't have unrealistic expectations for them. So if they don't grow in a particular year, we're not beating them up because we're generating plenty of cash and it's still been a very good investment. And we find that the entrepreneurs don't have to be motivated. As long as we're positive and enthusiastic and we want to back them and we help them, they're self-driven. We don't need some plan in the central office on how to figure out how to get these people to be excited to go to work. As a matter of fact, the only time that it's ever gone bad is where people in the central office have said, okay, you're going to use this telecom provider. And when the phones go out that day, guess what happens? They be furious. This is not my fault. This is their fault. I'm going home. I'm out of here. None of our children work in the business. today. Some of them have an interest in joining it, but it's going to have to be a meritocracy, and they're going to have to really prove themselves. And fortunately, there's sufficient capital that if they want to do something else, they can go do it. They don't have to come into this. If they want to and they're qualified, we'll look at it at that time.
Keep in mind, the way we got into this was it was really like a partnership from the outset. And we were building the business together, so it wasn't as though we sort of were brought in and nepotism was how we did it, you know.
It wasn't a family company.
It didn't start that way. And who knows what the kids will be interested in, frankly, as they get to college and graduate school. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they're happy and they feel productive.